morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak to you today in this incredibly impressive facility, which I'm amazed to discover here. I was also very pleased to be invited because it gave me an opportunity to spend yesterday in Penarth, where I grew up, and given the strange weather conditions we have at the moment, I was able to sit on Penarth Pier and eat chips and sausages sitting in a t-shirt. So it's been an absolutely wonderful trip down here, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I've been in post as Chief Executive of the National Association of Local Councils for about 18 months. I started last April, and I'm new to the sector. I've worked previously in principal authorities in England and also with the Local Government Association. And so the last year or so, it's been great to get out and about and learn a bit about the local council sector. And I'd just like to say how amazed I've been by the diversity in terms of size, the different issues, the challenges that everybody faces. But what I've also been tremendously impressed about is just how committed and enthusiastic people are in the local council sector. Sometimes they carry that enthusiasm a little bit too far, but nevertheless, it is great to see such commitment and enthusiasm. And I'm sure that's even more true in Wales. It was really interesting to listen to the Minister, actually, because he raised a number of things that have resonance with what is happening in England, especially around the general power of competence, austerity, obviously, but also the introduction of transparency arrangements and the whole sort of challenge of size and building capacity within local councils. And I'm going to say a little bit about what's happening in England, and hopefully that might throw up a few thoughts or ideas for you here in Wales. But if you don't mind, I will just briefly say a little bit about NALC as well. So the National Association of Local Councils was set up in 1947. It provides a range of services, and I'll say a little bit more about those in a minute. We spend about £1 million a year. We employ 15 members of staff, including 3 very experienced solicitors. And our role, really, very much like One Voice Wales, is to lobby government, to try to introduce laws and change regulations to make it easier for you as councillors to get on and do your job of improving local communities. We also do a lot of work to try to raise the profile of the sector in the media. I think sometimes the local council sector in England particularly gets a bit of a bad press, and we've really got to make sure that national newspapers, the BBC and other media are really covering what is happening in local councils at the moment. When you heard from the Minister about Frome in Somerset, but there are countless other examples of where local councils are taking on services that are being let go by principal authorities. And I think it's really important that we shout from the rafters about what local councils are doing and what more they could do if they were given the powers and the money to do that. As well as lobbying and raising the profile in the press, we provide legal and other advice, and that's available to colleagues through One Voice Wales. And we also work closely with One Voice Wales and the Society of Local Council Clerks on supporting training and development in the sector, which I think is absolutely essential if we're going to take over some of the roles and responsibilities that the Minister was outlining, and which is also being proposed in England as well. I'd also just like to say it's been great over the last year to meet up with Lynn a few times and just swap information on what is going on and gain a bit of knowledge and understanding, and he's been really, really helpful, and I've really enjoyed working with him over the last year or so. So turning a bit to the national context, I guess the first point to make is we have a new government in England, and it's a majority government, a small majority, but nevertheless a working majority, and it will be in place because of fixed term parliaments for 5 years. So we really have as an opportunity as the National Association to work with that government to try to shape its priorities and make sure that it's working in the best interests of local councils. This slide just shows who are sort of the key figures are, including the new Secretary of State, Greg Clark. And as well as obviously working with the new government, we're going to have to work with the new opposition leader, and also now the sort of third largest party in government, the Scottish National Party. And rather interesting that we had a visit from the Scottish Minister for Communities called Marcus Biaggi, who came down to visit National Association of Local Councils in London, because there is no equivalent of One Voice Wales or NALC in Scotland, and they are thinking of setting one up there to represent the interests of community councils in Scotland. So hopefully in the future there'll be opportunities for us to work across England, Wales and Scotland to try to make the case for local councils, the important work that they do and why they need to be trusted to get on and do the job even more effectively. The Secretary of State's got one very clear priority, I think, for the sector, and that's really around devolution. A cities and local government devolution bill is currently going through Parliament in England, and it will significantly change how England is governed, with devolution of national services and more strategic cross-service working around economic development, transport, health, etc., including the possibility of more directly elected mayors. You'll probably have heard a lot about the Northern Powerhouse and devolution to city regions and county deals and all that sort of stuff. And I think what we need to be saying as a sector and on behalf by the National Association of Local Councils is that the government will really miss a trick if it stops at just devolving services and responsibilities down to principal authorities. There is more about devolution than just the strategic level. Too often, I think some principal authorities take on devolved services and use that as an opportunity to produce sort of strategic papers and documents that sit on shelves. I think the real trick is to devolve as many powers and responsibilities and services down to the very lowest level where you understand your communities and where you can work to benefit them. So what we're arguing as a national association is, as well as the Northern Powerhouse, we need to have local powerhouses as well, which really puts the sort of community at the heart of devolution. I think if we don't achieve that, there's going to be a risk of a democratic deficit, with people, or the devolution at a very strategic level, linking of health and adult social services and so forth, but no real devolution to individuals and communities. And I think that's a challenge for NALC over the next 5 years of the new government, the Parliament, to really get that message across and win that case. And we've had some good meetings already with ministers, and we're hopeful we can persuade them of that. So it's really very much a historic opportunity. I've heard it described as sort of a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and we're calling it devolution local or devo local. At the moment in England, there are 38 devolution deals being discussed between the government and principal authorities. So lots of different counties and cities around England are trying to sign up for extra powers to be devolved from Whitehall. And we're really pleased that the government has announced that they want those deals to include devolution to town and parish councils as well. And that's something that we need to make sure that local councils are seizing the opportunity of. The Local Government Association that represents the principal authorities estimates that there will be something like about £12 billion of saving if devolution is done properly to principal authorities. And obviously that makes a great difference in the current world of austerity that the Minister was referring to. But we're also arguing that actually further devolution can release even more community investment and even more community savings. The government has done a bit of research that has started to talk about the economies of smallness. We've often talked about the economies of scale, but actually you can have real economies by doing things locally, by engaging volunteers, engaging different groups in the work of providing local services. And they've estimated that devolving services right to the very lowest level yields a return of about 1 to 3. So for every £1 of investment at a very local level, the actual outcome is about £3. So we think if devolution is done properly to local councils, as well as the savings of £12 billion, there'll be another sort of £3 to £5 billion worth of community investment. So that's important, and I think that makes it a really worthwhile thing that we're trying to achieve. So we're going to work with government, I think, and others to try to ensure that town and parish councils are really seizing this opportunity. And the Minister has made it very clear. He said devolution is relevant to all of us and is happening now. Don't miss the chance to reshape public services. So the question, I think, for me working in England is how can we grab this opportunity? And I think there are probably 5 areas that I'd like to just flag up. Firstly, we need to build on the successes of the sector and of localism so far. We also need to get better at lobbying, nationally, regionally and locally. And we also need to raise the profile of the sector in the media. We need to build our capacity at all levels. We need to promote the sector and we need to build strong partnerships. And I think some of those things were kind of issues that were being flagged up by your minister as well, and I'm just going to briefly run through each of those in turn just to say a little bit about what we're doing. So localism is not new in England. There have been a number of initiatives by the previous coalition government to promote local community involvement. Probably the most important of those have been neighbourhood plans, which provides for local engagement with the planning process. And there have been 1,500 of those so far in England. But the key fact for me is that almost wholly, those have been delivered by parish councils. 80% of those 1,500 neighbourhood plans have been prepared by parishes. Other neighbourhood groups can do it, but they're not really doing it. So our argument to the government is, if we have more parish councils, they will get on and do those neighbourhood plans. And those neighbourhood plans have been voted in favour. The average vote in favour in referenda is something like 80%. So they are linking local development issues with what local communities want, which I think is probably what devolution is all about. There's also the listing of community assets, facilities that people want to keep in community use. And again, a third of those in England have been led by parish councils. And the community right to challenge, there's been about 50 expressions of interest, including some by parish and town councils. You might not know that in England, only about 40% of the country is covered by parish and town councils. And the previous coalition government was committed to trying to increase that. And the National Association has, as part of its constitution, the aim of getting 100% of England covered by parish and town councils. And we're really pleased that over the last few years we've had great success in that, including the first new local council in London, Queen's Park in northwest London, but also in Birmingham as well, Sutton Coldfield. So I think the sector is going to change dramatically over the next few years, with more urban areas coming on stream and benefiting from the localism and the democratic elections that take place in our sector. And we're also involved in our place in other initiatives with the government where we try to join up services at a local level to improve community capacity. Lobbying, that's the other key thing I think we need to do more effectively. And I've shown you this picture because this was our first national lobby day that we did last June, where we brought representatives from all the county associations along to the new Parliament to meet with the new MPs and to make the case for local councils. And the point I really want to stress there, I think, is it's absolutely vital that we get local councillors talking more to their local MPs, telling them what they're doing, so that they're aware of what's going on in the sector, because often MPs don't really know what is going on. And so I think it's really important that you as sort of community reps talk to them and get the message across. And we're really arguing for three very simple things in our lobbying: stronger local democracy, fairer funding, and more powers. And if we're given those things, then we'll be able to really operate effectively as local powerhouses, delivering neighbourhood planning, building strong communities, and helping people through the difficult times that we face at the moment. And I guess some of those objectives there will probably have resonance with you in Wales as well. So we want to have an improvement in development strategy to help councillors and councils cope with some of these new powers and responsibilities. We want to get better funding for local councils, including a share of business rates, and to see things like the community infrastructure levy work properly. We also want to reform and simplify some of the outdated laws. We've got many laws that date back to the 1850s, and it's a very complex legislative framework we work within, so we really want to simplify that. And we want to see even more use of the general power of competence. That's been a great tool for parish councils to use in England, but some of the thresholds to participate in that are a bit high, and we're pushing for easement around that, which again sounds a bit like what's happening here in Wales. I think we also need to flag up that there are challenges for the sector in all this as well, and there are some hard messages that I think we need to get across to some councillors and some of our parishes and town councils in England. We probably need to change too. Sometimes some of our processes, some of our culture, some of our approaches are a bit old-fashioned, and we do need to look at where we can modernise those. And so we're working very closely with the Society of Local Council Clerks and also One Voice Wales on developing a new national training strategy that will provide some of the support for councillors and clerks to cope with the changing world that we face. And we launched the Local Council Award Scheme to try to assure people of the level of competence of councils, and we've already had about 700 sign up for that. It replaces the old quality council scheme. I think also, and perhaps more unpopular, we need to start talking about clustering and sharing services. There are some parts of England where there are too small councils that do need to work closer together if they are going to see some of the opportunities that are available at the moment. And I think we need to persuade parishes to be a bit braver and bolder about raising their precepts, borrowing money and investing. Again, the Minister spoke about Frome, I think, where they borrowed a significant amount of money to take over a facility. And I think if we really are going to seize the opportunity of devolution and make a real difference to our communities, then we need to be prepared to do some of those things, so that we need to change as well. We also need to build strong partnerships with each other, working closely with each other, with principal councils, and certainly the National Association in England is trying to develop close working relations with the Local Government Association to try to get principal councils working more closely with parish councils. I've gone to many AGMs and meetings like this in England and hear a lot of criticisms of the work of districts and county councils. And yes, often they don't listen to us, they don't engage with us effectively, but there is it takes two to tango really, and I think it's a duty on us to work hard to engage with the principal authorities so that we're part of the solution to their problems and not just another barrier or problem that they face. And we need to work better with other stakeholders, the health authorities, police, local economic partnerships in England and business districts and so forth, and with the public and the voluntary sector as well. Finally, just a slide that flags up a few of the things that NALC has achieved over the last year or so. And I think one of the things that we are really pleased about is that we've secured government funding to support the creation of new councils in England. And that's shown that actually if you invest in getting community groups to understand what the benefits of parish and town councils are, they will work to set them up. But they need that seed core funding beforehand to get their work done. We also secured some money to help some of our smallest councils cope with the new audit arrangements, the transparency requirements. And we're also in the process of setting up a sector-led body to procure audit services to support the sector once the Audit Commission is abolished, or now the Audit Commission has been abolished. We fought some good campaigns to try to ensure that council tax funding is passed on to local councils and to make sure that capping isn't applied to the sector. And we've made some achievements on legislation around parish polls. Also pleased with the new SILCA qualification that's been launched this year, which I think will help support some of the capacity issues that we've been talking about. And I've already mentioned the councils that are in the local council award scheme. And we also, this year, returned to a sort of an award scheme. So we will have a National Star Councils competition where we will recognise some of the best. Because I think the point I was trying to make earlier is we need to shout about this sector. There are some great examples of what councils are doing, but we don't tell enough people about it. And so by rewarding our best councils, we can really raise the profile of them with principal authorities, ministers and so forth. And finally, the thing that we're doing quite a lot of work around at the moment is through the Sustainable Communities Act and an attempt by a parish in Surrey, Cranley, to secure actually two parishes, Sevenoaks in Kent, to secure a share of the business rates, and Cranley in Surrey that wants to see non-domestic rates lifted from public conveniences. And I like to talk about that because it gives me the opportunity to put this slide on. Because it's not very often you get an opportunity to put a slide up of urinals, but this is quite an interesting case study, I suppose, because demonstrating, I think, the importance of getting people lobbying on the ground. Because David Cameron we had been pushing for non-domestic rates to be taken off public conveniences for some time. But David Cameron visited Cornwall on holiday and was approached by a number of MPs who had been lobbied by their local councils saying how ridiculous it was that they were taking over public conveniences from principal authorities, but were left with a great debt and a great ongoing expenditure. And of course, once local councillors had engaged with their MPs and the Prime Minister goes off, says he's going to look at this issue, and we're then getting coverage in the Telegraph, on the BBC, And within a few weeks of that, we were phoned up by the Treasury and were invited to go along to the Treasury to talk about business rates. So that really shows the success of lobbying if it's supported by local councillors on the front line talking to their MPs. So finally, I think the work for me over the next few years is to support NALC's objective of helping local councils become local powerhouses. I think this would lead to greater community buy-in, more devolved services, a huge leap in the number of neighbourhood plans, and a boost to local economies of £3 billion in community investment. I think that's a prize really worth fighting for, and to make this sector stronger at the end of the Parliament. And I suppose I'm just be interested to know really whether there is scope for Wales and England and indeed Scotland to work a bit more closely on all of this, articulating the case for local councils. And I think that's even more true, having heard from the Minister actually, because there is such a lot of good experience in both Wales and England that we could probably benefit a bit from by sharing across the border. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm around for this morning if anybody wants to talk to me about NALC or any of the issues I've raised today. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve James, Pembrey Port Town Council. Thank you for your presentation. Excellent presentation, I thought. Two quick questions. And lobbying, which is such a vital thing, you've had some success, we've had our own success here, but it is a very difficult thing to do. It seems that it's a lot more difficult in Wales. We're delighted to have the Minister here, I know, but nevertheless, in our experience, it has been difficult. So I wonder whether you could give us a little bit more meat on the bone about lobbying and how you feel that is best taken forward. And I'm particularly interested in lobbying local MPs, something that perhaps we've done a lot of here. We've gone straight to the Minister or to the Welsh Government. You seem to have gone down to the tier below and had it risen up in that way. And I'm just interested in this cross-national communication then, which I think is something which is useful. And I'm looking at Lynn and others, whether that's something that we can take forward. I know this is something close to Lynn's heart, but certainly some sort of forum between NALC, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, I would have thought, for our particular rather than for principal councils, I would have thought it would be useful. So your thoughts on some sort of forum for the whole of the UK which would be useful, and indeed lobbying, which is a vital thing. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Steve. I think on the lobbying front, I would say you've done well to get a minister to come along. We're trying to get a minister to come to our AGM in a few weeks' time, and they still haven't decided yet, so you're one up there, I think. I think one of the reasons why we're probably focusing a bit more on lobbying local MPs is that the majority is quite thin in the UK Parliament, and so the sort of, it's more important, I think, to get as many MPs as possible shouting about things, because I think the ministers are more worried in that situation. And that's partly the problem why we haven't been able to get a minister along. They won't come out of London on a Thursday, I think it is, because there are too many votes that are too close. They haven't quite got all the sort of agreements around voting sorted out yet. I also think I think it's better for politicians to hear from local councillors about some of the issues they face. And I think then MPs talking to ministers in coffee rooms or whatever has a great deal of influence. I'm not saying instead of lobbying ministers direct, but I think doing it in a complementary way. I think what is absolutely vital, though, is that we all singing off the same song sheet, and I think also to coordinate campaigns a few times. I talked about the public conveniences campaign, but the other one we had success on was the referendum principles, the application of capping to councils, and there we managed to get local councils to write to their MPs, to the ministers, and they had about 600 or 700 letters, and I think that made a real difference in terms of stopping capping being applied. In terms of working across the countries, I think that would be really helpful, and I'd be keen to talk to you and others about how we can maybe deliver that. Obviously, none of us have loads of resources to be able to do that, but I'm sure in the current new technology and things, there must be some ways we can share some experiences a bit better, because I think we've all really got really making the same sort of case, aren't we, that local communities need to be actively involved in providing a solution to today's difficulties and can engage people in different ways. So I think if we can come together to try to make that case at a very high level, would probably get quite a lot of interest, quite a lot of coverage, that perhaps individually in Wales, in Scotland and England, we might not get that message across. So I think it would be good to see something along those lines.
Diolch yn fawr. Un cwestiwn arall oes symud ar y sawl dde.
Thank you very much, Clive Eason from the Local Community Council. I was very interested to see how the concept of raising finance, increasing precepts, getting loans can be accomplished, because we have to realise that here in Wales, the earnings per capita is probably one of the lowest in the whole nation, if not the perhaps lowest. Therefore, there's a great deal of nervousness about exposing community people to loans and increasing finance. And I think that you'll find some resistance to that just because of the sheer practicality of exposure to finance which people won't want to take on. How do you foresee encouraging people?
I'll raise my voice and try it a bit nervously. So I'm wondering how, in NALC and also here in Modern Voice Wales, we can ease the process, not just of encouraging people to take on finance in their own communities, but to make them feel at ease or help the mechanism to do so in a way which would have not endangered their own finances.
No, I think that's a really good question. I'm not sure it's ever easy to persuade people to pay more in tax or precepts. But I think we can probably do a lot by illustrating what other councils have done once they have raised their precepts, so that people get an understanding of some of the benefits. And I'd probably use a case study of somewhere I visited earlier in the year, which was Falmouth in Cornwall, which is not that wealthier a part of the country. And they were faced that the Cornwall County Council is losing huge amount of funds, and they were closing youth services, public conveniences, bus services, a whole raft of things. And Falmouth ended up increasing their precept by 20% in order to support some of those things, so that they now run a bus service that takes people from a park and ride into the town to reduce traffic problems within the town. They've taken over running the youth service. And those are all the sort of facilities that actually local people really rate and could see some direct benefit from their investment, whereas a lot of the taxes that go to national government or principal authorities is a bit lost. There's a sort of a direct consequence, I think, of local investment. And I was talking to the clerk in Falmouth who said when the services were being closed, they got something like about 20 or 30 people come in and complained about why weren't the council doing anything. When they raised it by 20%, he only had 3 people came in to complain. And when he explained to them that the reasons the precept was going up was because they were supporting the cleaning of the beach and services that had previously been provided by the principal authority but weren't being provided anymore, they could really see the value and the benefit. So I think probably, as always, it comes down to communications. We need to make a case to the electorate before we raise a precept about what it's for, what it will deliver, how it will benefit them, and then tell them about that afterwards. Because I think if people see the benefits directly and understand where the money is going to be spent, then they're probably more likely to accept it than if they didn't. I mean, obviously, I don't think it's going to be easy to achieve, but I think my argument really is it's probably worth us making that effort, trying to make the case for additional investment in order to support local communities, and that the individuals at the grassroots will really see the benefit as a result.